Good evening. This is CTV News for Tuesday, March 1st. I'm Denise Douglas.
And I'm Patricia Malone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Well, mothers whose sons were killed by officers gather in Annapolis to push for law enforcement reforms and a return to community policing. Today, the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee held a hearing on about a dozen bills inspired by the death of Freddie Gray in Baltimore City. One would require all inmates to be secured with a seatbelt during transport. Another would make it a crime not to seek medical help for a detainee. Supporters say more needs to be done to build trust and transparency.
I was forced to go to the police department to go make a statement. I didn't have time. The police officers have 10 days. They can corroborate their story, get everything together. And as a victim, I was traumatized because my son was shot and killed in front of me.
He was a father of 2 children. He also was loved very much by me as his mother. He was a community person, and the reason why it's so important for me to be here today is because this is very important for us in our community. We need changes. We don't need law officers coming into our community just treating us any type of way.
We have a branch of the police department located in our community. It is now fenced off, almost like a gated community. You don't feel welcome.
A third measure would require video and audio recording in the back of every police transport vehicle in Maryland. However, the State Department of Legislative Services found that such a requirement would be costly to local governments and some colleges that have their own forces.
Here's some more news from Annapolis. The Maryland Senate delays a vote on a bill that would regulate when public buses and trains can record passengers' private conversations. The legislation would create guidelines for audio recordings and place limits on when they can be made. If passed, it would affect the bus in Prince George's, MTA buses in Baltimore, and ride-on buses in Montgomery County. Opponents argue the recordings are a necessary security tool, but supporters like Senator Bobby Zirkin say the technology violates civil liberties.
Well, MTA, kind of without authority, has expanded this program to microphones all over the bus in 500 of their buses, and there is some thought that they're now moving or thinking of moving to light rail, heavy rail, and so forth. That's problematic. There's no oversight. There's no penalties for dispersing the information without a legal reason. It's basically mass surveillance of the citizenry with no discernible reason for doing so other than the vague notion of public safety.
That bill will now go to committee for a vote on the proposed amendment. If it passes, the legislation will go to the floor for a vote later this week. After several months of studying and analyzing the county's finances, a Blue Ribbon Commission has released a preliminary report. The county executive established a group to address budget problems. Its members have met 5 times since last June. In a report, the commission chair suggested that new sources of revenue need to be identified and revealed several areas where reductions should be considered.
We will be looking at, as I said, economic development. The reality is that that's new projects coming online alone won't do it. MGM, which we all know is going to be an amazing project, is projected only to deliver about $30 to $40 million annually once it comes online. So that 30 to 40 is definitely a big piece of it, but alone it's not going to do it. So, but we started our discussion to learn about what projects are in the pipeline from the EDC. And Mr. Coleman gave a great presentation. We're also going to be looking at land use policies in the county and trying to identify if there are some ways that we can adjust our land use policies to create new revenue. And to be very clear, to identify new taxable land in the county.
If you would like to weigh in on the budget issues, the commission will hold a public hearing on March 24th at 7 o'clock at Harmony Hall, which is in Fort Washington.
Well, Congress hears testimony on the relocation of the FBI headquarters by one of its own. Representative Steny Hoyer spoke before a subcommittee today, stressing the importance of consolidating the agency and pushing for the new site to be located in either Landover or Greenbelt. Hoyer says Prince George's offers close proximity to the nation's national security agencies, as well as world-class research institutions. Hoyer also cited an FBI report that taxpayers would save at least $44 million annually by consolidating facilities.
The debate on that one goes on.
You are watching CTV News. I'm Patricia Vallone.
And I'm Denise Douglas.